Welcome to Grappling with a Gray, a forum for promoting the development of an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better face the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I'd like to introduce you to my guests for today. Jennifer Elder is a CPA, certified speaking professional who helps leaders future-proof their businesses by making smart decisions and staying ethical. Catherine Fitzgerald is owner of Catapult Leadership Group, working with organizational leaders as they navigate the choppy waters of aligning people, performance, and profits. And Dr. Robyn Odegaard is a concierge, high-performance psychologist who works with successful individuals who have hit a bump in the road in one area of their life. She helps keep the chaos of that bump from spreading to the rest of their life. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
here is today's ethics challenge. You've just finished your medical residency. You've been hired by a respected hospital that wants you to start immediately. However, because of state regulations and bureaucratic red tape, you won't receive your accreditation to practice medicine for 2 months and won't be able to start work until you do. You are eligible for unemployment. However, your parents paid for medical school, so you have no student debt, and your spouse has a good paying job, so you face no financial pressure. Do you file for unemployment? The floor is open.
I think that's my favorite answer to almost every ethical dilemma is it depends.
Yes.
Depends on your perspective. Are you focused on you? In which case you might say, I'm entitled to it. And on the other hand, you might be having a broader perspective where you're thinking about the intent of what unemployment is for. That is to help you pay your bills when you can't pay them. I'd love to hear from our other panelists.
So I'm wondering, if you don't take it, it doesn't help anyone. Like it doesn't make a positive difference. If you don't take it, it doesn't make a difference. But if you do take it and you either donate it or use it for other people, could you do better with it than the government would do with keeping it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that. You have a response to that, Catherine?
Well, I can't disagree with her. Dr. Robyn has a point. It is, actually both of you have a point in that you are entitled to it as a citizen of the United States who is, potentially a worker, and doing something philanthropic with the money may actually pay it forward in a better way than waiting for someone else to be unemployed. But then you can also look at it from the other side of the coin. And as a responsible citizen, I look at the debt and I think, oh, what am I leaving for my children and my grandchildren? And I think there is an argument to be made as a responsible person. I need to look at, is there an ethical need here for me to have this support? And if it isn't, do I take it from the government when it might be better served to someone else? I don't know the rules around unemployment in terms of whether they run out of money in a particular year. It doesn't seem like we have a budget that we live to. So
Yeah.
No, they won't run out of money in a year, but what will happen is it raises the unemployment contributions that are required by every other company. And that is typically not paid by an employee, it is paid by the employer. So
unless you're self-employed, when you can't get it, even if you do get unemployed, you still have to pay into it. You can't get out of it though.
Right.
There's a lot of loopholes.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid seeing a commercial for a publication called the Social Security Gold Mine. And it promised all sorts of tricks you could use to tap into Social Security that maybe weren't really intended for use. Presumably, it wasn't telling you to break the law. It was just guiding you to find opportunities that most people didn't know about and that maybe weren't really intended for your use. But if the whole purpose of unemployment is to be a safety net for people who need it, so if I technically can check all the boxes and I'm, as you say, I'm entitled to take it. We can come back to that word in a little bit. Nothing illegal. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm not manipulating the system. But is that really what it's there for? And if I'm taking advantage of money that I don't need, am I accelerating the debt? And while I could certainly argue that any one of us, and probably most of our listeners, could use the money more responsibly than the government, is that ethical to take the money as a form of welfare and then use it for something other than the living expenses for what it's intended?
So pay your living expenses and use the money you would use to pay your living expenses to do something else. I mean, so that argument's irrelevant. I think that it's either, I feel like we're talking about, do you take the money and decide to do something else with it? Or do you say, I don't need it, let me leave it for the government to find someone who's more entitled? Is that the word we want to use? More in need?
More in need, yeah. Well, and that, I think there are two sides to this in terms of, if you're looking at it as an ethical decision, it's pretty clean. If you don't need it, it's unethical. But at the same time, is it wrong? Because you check all the boxes. And I think it comes down to the person's individual decision in that moment of is this going to bother you later? And there's a lot of people who feel that they are entitled, they paid in, and not to derail the ethical perspective, but I think there's a lot of ignorance in the workforce about government money and about the way money flows through businesses and what the consequences of their choices are. So when you point out that it raises the contribution level for employers, that is something that 99.99% of employees in the United States would never consider or
I want to go back
understand.
to a comment you just made, because I want to touch on it. So you said unethical versus wrong. Not what did you do? Help me understand that.
Unethical would be I think, no, I said ethical or wrong.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, if you live a moral compass and you're looking at things from an ethical standpoint, it's a black and white, is this the right thing or not? Are you using it for what it's intended? And do you need it? Because it's a need-based application process. And so if it keeps you up at night after you take the money, then that's the ethical dilemma that is living within you. And I think if you're someone that makes decisions based on that, then I think the answer is no, you don't take it. But if you're someone that doesn't think of it that way, thinks of it in terms of, this is government money, I might as well take it because mine, I can check all the boxes. I mean, that's,
Yeah, I think this doesn't quite rise to the way I might describe something similar, that sometimes I'll call it lawful but awful. So
I like that.
An example might be the LA Lakers got millions of dollars in PPP funding. And the PPP money, technically, it was legal for them. They did check the boxes. But if you go back to the intent of the program, the intent of the PPP program was to provide money to businesses that had no other source of cash. Now, any one of the players could front the organization. And so it was lawful, but when it came to light, it became awful in the minds of the public. And the LA Lakers' response was to give the money back. So this isn't quite the same, but it is similar in that you can check the boxes and say it is legal for me. And sometimes when people are evaluating ethical situations, they will say, who am I hurting? And when it involves the government, the answer is, I'm not hurting anybody. But they're not, to your point, Catherine, they're not thinking through the fact that, yes, it does hurt somebody. Whoever this person last worked for. So when you pay into unemployment, there is an account for the corporation. And when somebody draws on it, their account goes down.
That's right.
And if too many people have drawn on it, that company is going to have to start paying more. If there's an imbalance in the fund overall, every company will start paying more. And this is state-based, not federal government-based. So I'm not sure that there really is an easy answer in here. And that's why we call them dilemmas, is that there's
When we're
right
talking-
and there's right.
When we're
That's why
talking
grappling would
about
be great.
ethics, are we talking about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law? Is that what ethics means in this case?
Well, I think there's legal. And technically you can check the boxes and say it's legal. And to your point, Dr. Robyn, is that what was the intent or the spirit of the law? Because sometimes when what Congress or our states write doesn't represent their intent.
Let me give you one of my favorite examples of something that may be a little similar to this. The government's been trying to get us to use dollar coins for decades. They're far more economical than dollar bills. In Britain, they love their £1 coins, but Americans just can't seem to make that adjustment. So they tried an incentive program. They gave you the opportunity to order online a roll of 40 coins for $40, and they would ship them to you postage free. So some people ordered a lot of coins, put it on their credit card, took the coins, went straight to the bank, deposited the coins back in their account, and pocketed all the credit card points that they got from ordering, in some case, thousands of dollars of coins. And when this came to light, and some of the people who had done it were asked about it, they had the same answer. Nothing illegal. We didn't break any laws. And one person boasted that he went to Tahiti on the points that he got from buying these coins. So, that money has to come from somewhere. We say it comes from the government. Where does the government get its money? It gets money from taxes. That's us.
That's why I said government money with the
Yeah.
quotes, because people don't think of it as our money.
So I find that case a little less gray, although I've had plenty of people who have argued that they've done nothing wrong because it's not illegal. But as you say, that's really ethics. If ethics and legality were the same thing, then there really would be nothing to talk about, would there?
Well, and if you
Right.
need a law to keep you from doing something that harms someone else, then that speaks to your character.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I would say, the ethical solution and the letter of the law are, a little bit, I would say that's an elevated standard. If we were talking about, the law, the legal standard, the ethical standard is higher than the legal standard because it's a moral compass, I look at that and I think I was raised in a family where the ethical standard was the standard.
Same. Yeah.
Well, Dr.
And
Robyn used the expression, the spirit of the law.
yes,
Mhm.
And that should carry weight.
Well,
Mhm.
and I know someone who works in a job where he gets laid off regularly. It just happens. And he collects unemployment every single time. So he gets unemployment probably 4 to 8 months of every year he's on unemployment. And he thinks absolutely nothing of it because, he goes down and he checks the box that he's looking for work. And when work comes back around, he goes, and when we were close, we're not as close as we once were, it bothered me that was the way it was set up. And he had absolutely no concerns about it.
Mm. And I think that was my point, in that most people don't, think about it in the greater context. They are thinking about me in what happens to me and how and then, the other thing that popped into my head is, because this is a medical student who's going to be a doctor, and we're talking about 2 months. What is his pay going to be in relationship, once he's a doctor? And, is there an additional ethical dilemma here, in that he's collecting unemployment, which is probably going to be peanuts in comparison to what he will make as a physician for 2 months? I mean, it's almost not worth the hassle, personally. I mean,
Well,
in terms of what
I think it's she. I think it's she.
She,
but I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
I think,
But
in
she'll
terms of
pay
my
more
son,
in than she'll ever get out of it.
Right.
And that's a
So,
really interesting point to add, Catherine, that in terms of evaluating need, maybe I don't need the money right now, but I know that the job I'm going to have, let's say it's not a doctor, let's say it's something with a much lower salary. And I know that I'm going to be struggling down the line. So taking the money now might be more justifiable.
Put it in the savings account for a rainy day.
Yeah. I mean, I know.
Which
when
would
my
be
wife and
more
I-
in line with the intent and spirit of the law, is to provide that money for a rainy day.
So are we
Right.
saying we're okay with taking it if it's put in on a savings account for a rainy day, but not to take it to maybe give it a charity, or not to take it to go to Tahiti, or not, like what we do with it then becomes part of the ethical question?
The rainy day scenario was one of anticipating a likely need, as opposed to maybe someday I'm going to need this.
And that may be, does the ends justify the means
Oh boy.
thought process.
Mhm.
I mean, I again, that's the thing with ethical dilemmas, is it's really hard to say that there is a wrong answer in an ethical dilemma. There are many right answers depending upon your perspective. And I think we've almost identified 3 levels here. There's what's legal, what might be considered ethical, possibly in the eyes of other people. And then there's your own personal moral compass. And how would you, can you sleep at night? Even if, you thought it was okay, or advisors would tell you, oh, sure, go ahead. But would it still sit right with you? So I think
I'd
that's
like
where
to-
it's
I'd like to
complicated.
revisit that. I mean, you raised that originally, Catherine. Can you sleep at night? There are some people who sleep just fine doing things that are really reprehensible.
that's why we have a legal system.
Well, yeah, but even then, there are cases of people who really manipulate the law,
Oh, yeah.
and are not doing anything that is technically illegal, but most of us would agree are really
Shady. The
wrong.
word you're looking for is
Shady, that's exactly the word I was
Yeah.
thinking of.
Another word for great.
And they know how to bend the rules just enough to stay out of trouble.
So do we
And
want to use the "can
interestingly-
you sleep at night" rule for us to reach a more objective evaluation?
Well, and people who don't do that, like people who don't buy government coins to get credit card points, think we're stupid that we don't. They're like, you're not taking advantage. What's wrong with you? You're obviously broken. And those of us on the other side are like, that's shady.
It is true. It puts individuals in the seat of justice over someone else, or judgment, I should say. And I feel that the whole ethical grappling is internal, and it's like doing the right thing when nobody's looking, doing the ethical thing when nobody's looking. And I think that's one of the things that, having raised 3 sons, and teaching them right and wrong. And, I think that was one of the questions, is like, if I didn't know, if I didn't see, would this still be, would it be right or would it be wrong? And having that conversation. And I think it's severely lacking in our educational system that we don't have a built-in mechanism to teach people about ethical decisions within our public education system. And so where do they learn it? They learn it from their nuclear family, or they learn it from watching. And I had someone in my life, early in my life, who was somebody that worked around every corner and got every opportunity he could and didn't have any trouble sleeping. And I look at it now, and I was a kid, so I wasn't, and he was an adult. So it was not a situation where I could say anything or would say anything, but I watched it and I saw it. And then I saw the way my parents made the decisions that were the hard choices and lived, with less, because they didn't cut any corners and they didn't manipulate anything. They followed the rules and their moral compass. And I think, isn't that what we're really talking about? The quality of ethical decisions is based on the person's moral training, upbringing, perspective, feeling.
And that gets harder and harder these days, because you're not, we don't have that really tight nuclear family environment that can be protected. We don't necessarily have as much engagement in various religions that provide a framework. And you have social media, which can, if you want to know how to scam somebody out of something, just go look for it on YouTube. There is a video to explain everything. And those are the things that make big splashes. So there may be a lot of people out there who just never grew up with a good moral compass. And, Catherine, you triggered a thought in me, is that sometimes those people that we might call sketchy or shady, I often hear them say, well, who's going to find out? As if that justifies it.
Right.
And yet that seems to, for some people, is to say, well, nobody will find out, so it's okay. And I'm not sure
it sounds like we're saying there's definitely a right and a wrong in this situation. We're coming down on the side of, if you don't need it, don't take it, as being right. And if you do take it, that's wrong. But a minute ago, we then said, but unless you might need it for a rainy day and then put it in a savings account, then that's okay. So I don't think it's as black and white as we think it might be.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying
so you think there's
it
a
is
hard
an
right, wrong?
individual decision of right and wrong. I mean, I'm not going to sit in the seat of judgment on another human being. So my decision is that I would, not do it. But that's my choice to make. And I respect someone else's point to make a choice, to opportunity to make that choice. But in the global, if we all are making decisions just for our individual perspective, the assumption, in the 30s, 40s, 50s is that we take into consideration the collective impact of our choices. I mean, you could see that as my grandparents and parents were, raising children. It was a totally different world. And there were I'm not saying better, worse. I'm just saying there was very hard lines about what is right and what is wrong. And my mom tells a story about her little brother older brother, stealing a piece of, a package of gum from the neighborhood store, and how my grandmother made him go back to the store, pay for the gum, and then clean up and sweep up for, a month in the store to make up for the wrongdoing. And it left a huge impact, and I think about my kids and how we talked about, trust in our family, and the fact that, when they got to be teenagers, they would want freedom, and you get freedom when we trust you. And so I made the analogy of, every time you tell me the truth, even when it's hard to tell me the truth because you're afraid of, whatever the consequences are going to be, you're making a deposit in your trust bank with me. And when you get to be a teenager, that will give you more freedom, because I will trust that even when it's a tough choice and you get into a pickle, you're going to call me and we're going to have truth talk, not, fabrications about everything. Well, boys will be boys. A few of them went bankrupt in the process. And it was in those moments that I said, you've withdrawn every ounce from your bank and, all your freedoms are gone. So, it's a largely what is right and what is wrong question is how you were raised, what are the influences from society. And I think it gets harder and harder to raise people that live by an ethical, moral compass. I don't know.
I would agree with everything you've said, Catherine, and Robyn. I would say, no, I'm not saying there is a right and a wrong. I like Catherine, I know what I would do, but I'm not going to judge what someone else would do because ethics is a personal framework. And we don't know where this other person is coming from. So we could add on to this story and say, okay, yeah, mom and dad paid for the person to go to med school and their spouse makes a great deal of money, but maybe their spouse's company has just been sold and their spouse doesn't know if their job is going to be there. Maybe their parents spent every last penny to get this kid into medical school, and maybe they don't have enough money now. I have a friend whose parents did that for them. And there's so much guilt associated with his degree because his parents are not, he sends them money on a regular basis. So there may be more to the story that we don't know. And if somebody has, they may appear to have a good situation that, they've done with med school, they have a great doctor's position, but we don't know what's behind that. And there might be fear. And there may be a growing up scenario, Catherine, like you mentioned, that, maybe they didn't have money when they were small. And this becomes a huge fear for somebody. So they will act in any way they can to protect against that same issue. So I think there are all answers in here. And I think each one of the answers is correct. Whether you take it, don't take it and give it away, take it and save it, whatever your answer is.
Yeah. I told Jonathan before I came on here that when he sent out the question, this happened to me in 2003. And I had to decide, I'm eligible, I certainly can, but I don't need it. And I chose not to. And to this day, I wonder, did I make the right choice? Was that foolish? Should I have taken that money and put it in my retirement account?
But I think you don't have to wonder, did I do something wrong?
No, I don't have to wonder, did I do something wrong? I do wonder, did I make the wrong choice or make the incorrect choice? Would I be better off now if I had made a different choice then?
Yeah, and I had a similar situation too, which I'll say for the second segment. One of my favorite quotes is from Jim Rohn, who says that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that's why I value these discussions, because by us spending time together and discussing these, what comes out is that it's not black and white, and that invariably, whatever the scenario is, there are all sorts of unanswered questions. There may be individual situations, circumstances, considerations that will change the outcome and change it from being ethical to unethical or vice versa. And that the value is to try to examine all the angles, to try and see it from all the different points of view, to go through this process and ask ourselves continuously, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the ethical thing? And I really admire you, Dr. Robyn, that whenever we go against self-interest, that requires a real force of will. And I would say that maybe you didn't make the best decision in terms of outcome, but I think that the process and the sort of ethical courage to make that decision and to forego something because of the risk that it might not be ethical. I think if more people would err to that side, to err against the side of self-interest, I think that our society would be in a much healthier place.
I agree with
I
that.
agree.
I think we'd all be
Yeah.
better off.
Mhm.
So thank you. This time went by really fast. And I hope you stay with me into the next segment. I'd like to get my notes out here. Thank my guests, Jennifer Elder, Catherine Fitzgerald, and Dr. Robyn. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you'd like to suggest an ethical scenario or dilemma for discussion, please go to my website, jonasandgoldson.com. That's jonasandgoldson.com, and use the contact box to submit your suggestion. If it's compelling, we'll be happy to take it up. If you're grappling with a great member, please use the community link to participate in a follow-up open forum and continue discussion. If you're not a member, please go to gwtg.live. That's gwtg.live, where you can sign up for a free 30-day trial and enjoy member benefits. Please join us next week when a new panel takes up a new dilemma and we argue or we grapple with the gray.